The Roman Republic. 2,000 years of civilization, law, and order. Ended by a bunch of men who couldn't agree on who got the nicer half. It started, as most disasters do, with a funeral. Julius Caesar had just been stabbed 23 times on the floor of the Senate, which historians note is 22 more times than was strictly necessary. And now, two men were standing over his corpse deciding who was in charge. First, Mark Antony, Caesar's right-hand man, experienced general, famous for giving a speech at Caesar's funeral so emotionally manipulative it started a riot. The man was basically a walking PR campaign with a sword. Second, Octavian, Caesar's 18-year-old great-nephew, whom Caesar had quietly named his heir in his will. Octavian had never commanded an army. He had never governed a province. He had, until extremely recently, been in school. Antony took one look at this teenager and laughed. The teenager wrote it down and waited. What followed was the second triumvirate, technically a formal political alliance, practically two men and their friend Lepidus agreeing to split the Roman world into thirds so they could immediately start plotting against each other. Lepidus, for the record, got North Africa. He would later be quietly retired and told to stay in his garden, which he did for 20 years until he died. Nobody at Rome particularly noticed. But first, revenge. Caesar's assassins, Brutus, Cassius, and a supporting cast of senators who really should have thought this through, had fled east and built an army. Antony and Octavian followed them to a place called Philippi in northern Greece, and in 42 BC they won. Brutus and Cassius both died. Cassius by his own sword, based on a miscommunication during the battle, and Brutus shortly after, having reportedly called Antony and Octavian the more virtuous men. Antony said that was very generous. He buried Brutus in his own best cloak. This was considered an extremely classy move, and Antony talked about it for years. With the assassins dealt with, Antony and Octavian turned to the obvious next step, which was turning on each other. Antony took the glamorous East, Egypt, Cleopatra, enormous wealth, and a lifestyle that ancient sources describe charitably as indulgent and less charitably as absolutely feral. Octavian got Italy, which was cold, politically complicated, and full of soldiers who needed to be paid. For about a decade they maintained a fiction of alliance, cemented by Antony marrying Octavian's sister Octavia, who was by all accounts brilliant, dignified, and completely wasted on him. Antony then left for Egypt, sent Octavia a brief note explaining he wouldn't be coming home, and moved back in with Cleopatra. Octavian declared this a personal insult, a political betrayal, and a national emergency. He was probably only two of those things, but he promoted all three heavily. He published Antony's will, illegally by breaking into a temple, because it left significant Roman territory to Cleopatra's children, which was, it must be said, an extremely easy thing to campaign against. At the Battle of Actium, 31 BC, the two fleets met off the Greek coast. Antony's ships were larger. Antony's army was experienced. Antony's girlfriend left halfway through the battle, and he followed her. His fleet, now leaderless and deeply confused, surrendered. Antony retreated to Egypt, received false news that Cleopatra was dead, and stabbed himself, incorrectly and not fatally enough to avoid a prolonged and undignified end. Cleopatra, for her part, was absolutely still alive. She died shortly after by her own hand, refusing to be displayed in Octavian's triumph back in Rome. Octavian returned to Rome as the sole ruler of the known world. He renamed himself Augustus. He declared the era of civil war over. He became the first emperor of Rome, a title he technically refused, preferring to be called simply first citizen. He then ruled for 45 years and built a monarchy so thorough that the word Caesar became the German word Kaiser, the Russian word Tsar, and eventually the name of a salad. The Roman Republic was dead. The teenager who had never commanded an army had won. And somewhere, in the garden where he'd been quietly told to stay, Lepidus probably had a very nice afternoon.